For this case study, we're going to head up to a waterfall up here, and we're going to take a few different photographs. So the great thing about this waterfall is that you can actually walk behind the back of it. So you can have a view looking out over the mountains and the trees and the rocks and the river, and you can actually have the waterfall come down in front of you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go behind it and I'm going to go to the side of it. We're going to use frame within a frame, which is going to be the opening of this waterfall. And we're also going to use leading lines to add depth and interest into this frame. And we're going to shoot from multiple different locations. So let's talk about how I'm going to shoot this. Well, first of all, I know that I'm going to have to shoot a panorama. And with a panorama, I know that it means taking multiple photographs. When we take multiple photographs to stitch them together, you have to make sure that each setting across each photograph is consistent. So I'm going to set my camera to manual mode. I'm considering probably around f9, 1/200th of a second, and ISO 200 are some basic settings. That means it's going to freeze the motion from my camera. It's going to freeze the motion from the trees that might be moving, some of the river movement. It's not going to freeze the motion of the waterfall, but that's to be expected. You wouldn't want that to freeze anyway. F9 adds a good depth of field. It means that I'm going to see far into the distance with good focus. And ISO just allows me to double my exposure, add 1 stop more light, which allows me to go to F9 rather than one of the wider apertures, which wouldn't give me as much depth of field. I'm also going to use autofocus to initially focus. Then I'm going to switch to manual focus, because as I take photographs and I switch from the different viewpoints, I go round and round and round, I don't want my camera to refocus. You don't want to stitch together a panorama where one photo is focused in the foreground and the other one's focused in the background. It's not going to work, it's not going to look good. The other thing to consider with this panorama is I'm using a set white balance mode. I'm not using auto white balance. If I use auto white balance, well, there's a good chance as I look over here to over here, there's going to be different white balances in these shots. And each of my photo is going to have a different white balance. That's not going to work. So depending on the lighting conditions when I get up there, I'll probably set it to either sunny day or cloudy. And I'll use that same setting throughout. Remember, I'm shooting in RAW here, so I can go back in the future and I can change this white balance. The most important thing is that it's consistent for this right now so that I can see in my camera whether I like it or not. So that's the basics of how I set up. The first photograph I'm going to take is going to be from behind the waterfall. It's going to give me a nice field of view all the way around, almost probably maybe 150 degrees, a really wide field of view. And I can crop that in if I don't want as much detail at the sides. And then I'm going to move around the waterfall a little bit further. I'm going to take a photo of the waterfall from the side, so it's going to crash down into the river, onto the rocks and make its way downstream. I'm going to get some of the background depth with the trees and some of the rocks in the river, which is going to add more interest to the photograph. Another photo I may take is a vertical panorama looking up at the waterfall as we go up. That usually works out to be a nice photograph, but it's a little bit trickier because of how the perspective changes through this panorama. Doesn't always look great, but it's worth testing. And I'm going to move around and try multiple different locations around this scene. It's important that when you find a location through your location scouting, you don't just stick to one single shot. That's a common error, because if I Google this waterfall, it's going to show me this photo of the waterfall in front of me, and then I'm standing behind and I've got this panoramic view, and that's a great photograph. But there's so many other shots to shoot there, you don't want to come away with the same photos as everyone else. So take some time, experiment and walk around. Something I'm pretty used to doing when I shoot landscapes is waiting for a long time. A long time because there's going to be tourists there. It's a Sunday afternoon. There are going to be locals hiking around here taking photographs. Not much I can do about that. I have to wait for the locals and the tourists to disappear. And there will be times where there's just a few people in the scene, and that's better. Other times you might want to position yourself so that they're blocked out by trees or the waterfall or rocks. Or you might want to try and stand in front of some of them. It's a case of experimenting, taking your time, and getting the best results possible. When it comes to taking this photograph, the last thing that I really need to consider is my camera settings. It's the first thing I think about, but it's in the back of my mind once I've set them. Because it's not about the camera settings here, it's about playing with the composition and getting new and interesting photographs and testing different angles and ideas. So when you come to a location like this, don't just stick to what you saw online in your location scouting. Go ahead and think and explore for yourself and use different points of view. Sometimes one thing I like to use is I shoot with my left eye. I'll bring up my left eye, lens cap on, standard, and then I'll switch and I'll use my right eye because it allows me to shift my thinking and it forces me to think, okay, I can't do what I just did. I have to do something different. And that gives me different ideas. They might not always be better, but it encourages me to go and try something new. So that's a case study of this waterfall. I hope you enjoy the footage and the photos that come out of it. Thanks for watching.